Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of... Well, let's be honest, it's not that exciting, is it? Exciting episode of SalesTV.
It's not exciting if you don't believe in it, no.
I don't believe in the Beatles, I only believe in me, or whatever it was that he said. Yes, welcome everybody to what we like to think is a bit of a safe space for salespeople, where we can come and chat and learn and air our feelings and vent and all of those things that people need to do in their high pressure jobs. Let's go around and introduce ourselves, the normal panel, before we get our special guest with air our feelings and Alex, you go first.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Alex Abbott, founder of Sapiro. We help people empower people to generate new conversations in sales. And if you'll see on my title now, just on the bottom left-hand side of my screen, I am excited to be here.
You're excited, Alex?
Yeah.
Andy.
Andy Huff, lecturer at Cranfield University in Sales Leadership Performance, founder of the ISP, all-round good bloke, and fellow netball parent with Rebecca. So, be very careful. She will give you the Ghanaian knuckle if you're not careful, as she has threatened me with that on several occasions.
Is that a netball term?
Yes. I think it is, yeah. I haven't actually looked it up, but it scared the life out of me when she said it.
Yeah, it does sound like it's some sort of torture, doesn't it? Tim.
Hello, I'm Tim Hughes. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. Probably most famous for writing the book Social Selling Techniques to Influence Buyers and Changemakers.
I'm Adam Gray. I'm Tim's business partner and co-founder of DLA Ignite, and I guess I'm the compere of today's proceedings. And lastly, and most importantly, our special guest, Rebecca. Introduce yourself.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm Rebecca Nyamah, and I'm an organisational psychologist and a psychoanalytical psychotherapist, and I'm the founder of River Nine Consultancy.
Welcome, Rebecca.
Yeah, welcome.
Really happy to be here.
Rebecca's kindly agreed just to unpack your issues, Adam. So,
Andy, we've only got 45 minutes, mate.
Yeah, it's true. So.
This will be a long series, won't it? I must say, your introduction, Rebecca, it sounds like someone needs a PhD just to say that, let alone do that stuff.
Well, I am working on my doctorate, yes.
Well, there we go.
Two on the call.
Yes, absolutely. As you know, Rebecca, every week we come on and we chat about sales and the challenges facing salespeople. And one of the things that we've kind of bumped into, like a clumsy person in a room full of furniture with the lights turned off, and we keep bumping into this issue again and again and again, is that sales is a challenging environment for people to be in. And in order for them to perform, they must feel that they're in a safe space. They must feel that they've got the support of the people around them, and that they won't be pilloried if they make a mistake or something doesn't pan out quite as they hope it's going to. So how does one create a safe space? How does one create an environment where people are able to experiment and try new things?
Well, it's quite easy, although I think it's got an issue of appearing aloof. So I think the term you're looking for is psychological safety, which a lot of people brand about without knowing what it actually is, and make it seem really complicated when it's not. And the amount of times I've interviewed potential leaders, and they said, well, it's all about psychological safety. And my other panel will nod, and I'll say, what is that? And they'll say, safety of psychology. Which means nothing. Now, psychological safety, it's really simple. It's one of those things where my grandmother would say, well, I've told you that for the last 40 years. Why is it now a psychological term? And it's very simply truly embracing employee engagement, looking at the communication levels and whether somebody really truly feels safe to give their opinion without being chastised. So I suppose in the sales concept of psychology safety, it's really about embracing relationships, not only with clients, but with your colleagues, because you're more than likely in highly charged environments, target-driven environments. So it's even more important. And because of those environments, the exchange between people within an organization, that's where psychological safety really steps in.
So I've got a point here, because and we've talked about this before, where there's been research done last year with the Sales Health Alliance that found 79% of salespeople are highly stressed, 63% are suffering with poor mental health, and 60% of sales leadership is suffering with poor mental health, which we believe is as a result of being forced to do things, to work in a way that isn't generating success. And it's almost creating this melting pot of distrust internally. So it's kind of mind-boggling. How on earth do you then create psychological safety in that sort of environment? You said it's easy, but I'm not sure
Well,
it is.
I say it's easy, but easy doesn't mean quick.
Yeah.
But the steps towards it are easy if you're able to break it down. And we'll go through how we do that in the end. And you'll say, oh, yeah, but I kind of knew that already. And it's just about putting it all together. Yeah. So I, in particular, start with, if we look at personality assessments, and I don't know if you want to do a bit of role play here, but could we invite the bearded salesman to?
Oh,
I've heard of this bearded salesman.
Yeah, he's a bearded sales guy, but yeah, he's.
There we go.
He's just getting into character.
The first time he's worn a tie in about 12 years.
Yeah,
and it's a nice
hold on a second.
Oh, he's got a jacket. My God, we all know.
I think Tim and I in particular would just like to point out Alex has a man bun, which it is something that I find it's driven purely by jealousy, I hasten to add. Something that I find truly horrific, that somebody of his age, almost my age, can be in a position to have to sport a man bun.
No, I think you'll find
no one wants to hear it.
That you've not really created a very strong psychological safe place.
No, I can feel a personality assessment coming on here.
Yeah, I've wanted to say that ever since we started SalesTV, but that would not be very nice. So make notes, Adam.
It's purely envy, Andy, as you well know.
Anyway, back to you, Rebecca. Stealing
so
your show.
Let's take bearded sales guy, and he's super ambitious. He smashes all his sales targets. He's very popular amongst his colleagues, who are in turn also very successful in reaching their targets, but he really smashes it. So due to his winning ambition, he's then made team leader. Now, everyone thinks this is perfect because he's great at doing his sales and his targets. Let's make him a leader automatically. Now, all of a sudden, the team is now struggling to meet their individual targets, and there's a toxic environment starting to develop. And the common denominator to all the conflict is the new ambitious team leader. Now, with regards to personality assessment, that's an example of where something really positive, i.e. ambition, has now become a derailer. It's a derailer in that it's taking what was good off track.
You mean my team won't like my Porsche sitting in the car park?
Teamwork as in, well,
No.
no, because merit should be rewarded, I believe. But it's when the Porsche is parked in the disabled bay. because you're team leader.
Yeah.
And is this bearded sales guy a lone wolf?
Yeah. And I'm going to try and avoid TV links because it's so easy for people to fall into that. But it kind of takes it depersonalizes things, and it actually covers over some really dark issues which can really affect people's lives, not only in the workplace but their family life and personal life. So coming back to the ambitious bearded sales guy, as an organization and as the leader of the bearded sales guy, you really need to get a grip of this derailer. The derailer being his ambition. He's there because of the ambition, and you just want the positive sides of this. You want him as now a leader to be able to foster the strengths of the individuals that he's leading. And you need him to be analytical and critical at the way he guides his team. And with the introduction of AI, leadership, whether you're new to it or quite advanced, you're in uncharted territory with regards to any industry. So the thing that is solid ground is human to human communication and contact. So we've got this situation where there is no psychological safety because it leads to conflict. And what we really want to get to is for the bearded sales guys team to be able to say, I'm really effective at my work. My relationships within my team are positive. I feel that my leader can influence me to help me solve problems. And I feel free to express my opinions at work. If somebody in that team can't say that, then you do not have psychological safety, full stop. You want nearly everybody to be able to say those kind of things. So, and this is measurable, which we can come into. I'm sure there'll be questions about how do you measure that. But quite simple, and it's kind of going straight to the end. What you really want to give, and even if you Google this, they will still skip a couple of really essential concepts. And it's my belief as an organizational psychologist and psychotherapist that you need to give your all employees the ability to be aware of their bias. Because once you identify your own bias, which everybody has, it's not something to be ashamed of. Everybody has it. But what you need is people to be able to practice not allowing their bias to impede on your behavior towards somebody or your decision making. Because once people see that that's the situation, that's the position that you're coming from, it's only from that point that you can develop open and respectful communication.
And it would
which then leads on to people being able to trust what you say because they know they are truly being listened to.
Yeah.
And then that then links on to creating a culture of growth mindset where failure or making mistakes, which is a human concept, is seen as an opportunity rather than an excuse just to fire somebody, because that's where the fear comes in. So you can't have somebody working in fear and be open and productive and effective. So the growth mindset, which is something where my past career as a senior leader in teaching comes into effect, where a lot of schools try and promote growth mindset, where making a mistake is not an issue, it's an opportunity to learn from it. But you better learn from it then, because if it happens again, then that's not a mistake. You made a choice there. But it's really important with regards to growth mindsets. And these are scientifically valid concepts. You need to give people a chance to learn at their speed and give them a chance to get into their lane at their speed. Otherwise, you've got all these personality traits that will just derail. And you've got a disorganized culture.
how do you balance that with the pressures of business? You know, the bearded sales guy is now running a team. The team isn't making its number. Yes, absolutely. You know, Tim and I report to the bearded sales guy, we're not getting close to our number. And the bearded sales guy is saying, actually, if we don't make our number, we're going to have to shed some staff because we can't support this size of organization based on the revenue that we're creating. Now, and don't get me wrong, I'm not excusing this as a behavior, but ultimately you're in a situation where allowing people to learn at their speed rather than my speed is counterproductive and counter to the best interests of the organization as a whole. And yes, people make mistakes. You know, I was talking to this client. It was a surefire client that was spending $1 million a year with us. And then all of a sudden they don't want to work with us anymore because of now that's a mistake I made and I've learned from that mistake. But unfortunately, that's torpedoed the organization. So how does one strike a balance between these things, making it a safe, friendly space where we feel like we're members of a family and we're all marching in the same direction, but also there's a sense of urgency and impetus in our behavior because we know we were on a time scale and we've got objectives we need to hit.
Indeed. And I think the first question is, rather than what's happening with our targets, the question needs to be, what's the problem? And that team needs to say, we used to make our targets, but now we don't because of you, X, Y, and Z, and you, X, Y, and Z, and this is affecting it in this way. And as a team leader, you need to be able to take that on board because you're no longer an individual, an ambitious individual. You are a team leader. And so actually your target is not your own personal target, it's the target of this team. And if that team who used to make their targets isn't making their targets, and there is a common denominator of the way you're leading it, it's for you to find out what that issue is. Not for people to be thinking groupthink or in fear of saying something which is inevitably going to cost the organization a lot of money. And even to get to that point, you're already losing money already before you've lost any contracts because that conversation hasn't been had. And that's where psychological safety needs to be. Leaders need to have broad shoulders. If you're going to step up into a leadership position, have broad shoulders. You can't be precious. So if somebody's giving you feedback where you are affecting your team, you're literally self-sabotaging yourself. So it's not cozy and it's not even family. It's being real because the consequences are extremely real and you are already losing money before you even lost the contracts.
But we've got a big issue here, haven't we, around the structure, particularly of large enterprise, because I'm an independent contributor. I'm doing really well. I'm achieving my number. I'm being well rewarded for that. I want to move up the corporate ladder as a consequence of my success in my role. And that inevitably, in most organizations, means that you become a manager of people, whether you're equipped to do it or not. You know, the reward that you get for having achieved your number for 3 years on the trot is that you get promoted and you now become a manager of people, whether you have the skills to do that or not. And I think that the organization is hoping that your success as an independent contributor will percolate down into you encouraging your team to be successful as independent contributors. The reality is, though, that and somebody had said this earlier, that the skills required, here we are. It was Steve that said this. They're totally different qualities. Having leaders above them who know how to train and support people in their progress, leadership. It's like just because you're a brilliant salesperson, it doesn't mean that you'll have any skills as a people manager. And yet that is the transition and that is the development that you have within most organizations these days, I think.
And I think organizations really need to look at this because that has been the traditional route of not only in sales, but many industries. And that can't be the only way to progress. If you are a really successful individual working within an organization, being a manager can't be the only route to maximize your success. And a lot of people, they feel that that's the only way, whereas an organization offer a different route. Bring in exceptional leaders that focus on the leadership, because it may need a team restructure in order to accommodate this successful individual.
Hold on a sec. This conversation is excellent and needs to be spoken widely. So, Rebecca, do you have a book or a podcast?
No, I've got about 15 books within me, but I haven't started them yet. But I have been asked several times about books and podcasts. So, yeah, maybe I should start.
Well, we certainly need to have you come back if you come and do a regular slot with us, because I think this is, I've been scribbling away here, and there's a couple of things, and they're certainly not rants, but I love the growth mindset, and failure is seen as an opportunity. So just adding a comment there, I remember as a young graduate being exceptionally hungover one day on a course at Lloyds Bank.
That doesn't sound like you, Andy.
I know, it doesn't. And looking at the carpet, and there's a reason behind this, and the carpet kind of loomed up at me and someone had asked me a question. And I actually missed the question completely. So I was stood with the choice, and I actually went, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question, and I'm not sure I know. And instead of getting a rollicking, the trainer actually said, thank you. Really, really good job. Thank you for being honest. And it was an amazing moment that I've never forgotten. And interestingly, in sales, we expect all salespeople to know everything. And in the days, Tim, where you and I would be working in the same company, and you would be a subject matter expert and I'd be a general account manager, I wouldn't know the answer that the customer had, but you would. We'd set up another meeting. You say, I'm awfully sorry, I don't know that. That's Tim's realm of responsibility. But we expect Andy to know absolutely everything about all the products and everything. That didn't happen 20 years ago when we had less complexity. So how did we get to that point here, which I think is fascinating. But I also love your point, Rebecca, about we're already losing money, which is to Adam's point. How do we do this when we're already costing ourselves as sales functions millions of pounds? 10% of sales functions don't have enough salespeople, and people are leaving, and the cost of somebody leaving because they're burnt out, to your point, bearded sales guy, is roughly equal to their to their target.
Yeah.
So what happens is the uncomfortable truth, Adam, is the finance people are not actually adding all of this up and going, it's costing us millions already. Maybe if we didn't do this, maybe actually we'd have lower goals, bizarrely enough, because we wouldn't have to keep over-quoting, because we've got all of this revenue just flying out the door with our salespeople who are leaving on average. I
think that's certainly true in terms of the mechanics of how an organisation makes money. But I think that if we take a step back, there's a bigger issue here, isn't there? That your development in your career, whatever career that is, goes from independent contributor to manager to group manager to VP to SVP, and that's your way up the ladder. And each successive step means that there are more people in your organization. Now, I'm not saying that it's good, because it clearly isn't. I'm not saying that it's right, but that is your expectation of development in your career until ultimately you become managing director or CEO of the business, perhaps.
But that's only in sales. So that's coming back to Jung and learning in action. And that only happens if you're an accountant, if you're an engineer, you have this thing called professional development, and you develop your knowledge in your field of expertise, and you codify that and you amplify it out to get more trust. The only way you get any progression in sales, because we don't acknowledge professional expertise, is to actually go up that rung. So I'm a people manager, I've got a team, I'm a direct manager, then I'm a manager of managers, then I'm a manager of many managers who manage other people who manage managers. And to your point, we don't ever develop them.
I don't think it's just sales. I think it's every function within an organisation.
No, I don't.
You go from being a bookkeeper to being an accountant to being head of finance.
But you develop your skills and knowledge as you're doing that. So
absolutely right. But those skills and knowledge, surely, if you're an accountant or you're a consultant or you're a technical expert, in each instance, the skills are developing in your own realm. You know, I'm a product designer. I get better at designing products. I design more products. I lead a team of people designing products. At no point necessarily is my management skill developed to lead that team. Now, in sales, obviously, it's much easier to quantify because, you know, I'm leading a team of people and they all have a number to make. And are we making our number? In product design or consulting or finance, it might be more difficult to measure that. But ultimately, it still boils down to the same thing, doesn't it? Which is, in order to manage people, you need to be taught how to manage people. And most organizations don't have a structure in place to do that.
Or is it managing, or is it developing? Sorry.
But we're still in a situation in sales where everybody comes in as an individual contributor, and then it's deemed. I've known people in sales who go in sales all the way into their 40s and their 50s, but they're basically asked and said, "So don't you have any ambition?" Well, where's your ambition? Because the expectation is, as soon as you get into sales, you've got to get out, because of the fact that it's so rubbish in sales. So what you do is you take a leadership role because it's your way of getting out, or you go into channel or whatever. But the view is that actually people like being in sales, but they're deemed as then not having any ambition.
I'm gonna ask you a question, and it's not a challenge, but you mentioned this a couple of episodes ago about, I think, your 28-year-old who decided he didn't want to be in sales anymore.
Yes.
Could you share, if you feel comfortable, some of the reasons why? Because I'd be interested in Rebecca's view on that, about attracting people to sales now.
Yeah, so Rebecca, my partner has two sons. One of them's 28, and he's actually been very successful in sales, and he's decided that he doesn't know what to do with his life at the moment, which means he's working in a pub. So he's not scared of work, but we still haven't really got to the bottom of why that's the case. But I think there's a certain amount of there's an expectation. There's an expectation that what are you going to do this week? What are you going to do this month? What are you going to do this quarter? And I think there's and of course, sales is very binary. It's a bit like sport, you know, like you do we talked about netball earlier on. In a game of netball, someone wins and someone loses. And in sales, someone wins and someone loses. And sometimes I think some of these things are, you know, when you lose a deal in sales, you're not necessarily given the support that you would do if you won a deal.
Very good point.
And you know, when you talk about having an environment of, so, you know, if you play netball and you lose a match, you're still given the support in terms of that you lost. You know, we haven't, you know, we have a female football team who lost the World Cup, but they're still heroes in our view. And so why is it that if we lose a deal, you're not a hero? So, and I think there's a whole bunch of things which are generational around, where people are talking about we need to have purpose, we need to have, you know, and there's a lot of these things we're not supporting people through the process. Sorry, Rebecca, it's you're the person that needs to be talking.
No, not at all. I was going to ask, going back to your son.
It's not my son, it's my partner's son back.
Did he enjoy the process of relationships between those he had a product and he wanted to share his expertise?
I think like a lot of people who move into sales, they actually quite enjoy the social side and the building relationships, and in many cases, probably even learning new things. I mean, he took a role in an organisation that sold into the NHS, and actually said, "I don't know anything about the NHS, but I'm keen to learn." And I don't know. For me, I still don't know the answers myself, so it's difficult to kind of answer. But it's just an example of somebody in a demographic that has just walked away from sales.
And that comes back to a great comment that Rebecca made out of many of them, though, isn't it? Which is, you know, the chance and the choice to learn. And that there is a great paper by two guys, Artis and Harris, that I go to bed with every night. Dr. Dale Charles has just arrived almost on cue. He'll know that paper. And it actually says salespeople, logically, are the best self-directed learners in any organisation. We just don't give them a chance.
Yeah.
We tell them what they need to know, and not actually encourage them.
It's interesting because he actually worked for a learning training company, a company called Learnerbee, which so what they do is that, you're probably aware that most startups, because they don't have the infrastructure to provide training teams or learning development teams, what they do is that they give each person basically a budget. And they sold a piece of, they said a learning platform that allowed people to spend that £2,500. So there was actually quite a big environment of learning within that organization, because they wanted all of their people to use the products, to say, yeah, I've used my, and I've done this course. So, but we still haven't got to the bottom of, and it's why he's decided to leave sales.
I think it's more organizational, not only culture, but structure. And the atmosphere and the environment that you described that he was in was literally like trying to catch a light into a box and keep it sealed. Well, light eventually does splurge out. You just can't contain light at all. And why would you want to? And I think the way on the nature of not only sales, but many organizations with the use of technology, it's just a lot easier for the light to get out. So it's understandable that if you are the light, which sounds a bit...
I understand the metaphor.
Yes. Not happen on a pedestal or anything, but as many employees are the lights of organizations, and if you're going to stifle them, then you as an organization will die. And it's the organizations that are moving, and I hesitate in using the word change because it sometimes sends shivers down people's backs, but we are forever evolving, and your employees are evolving. And if you want to keep up with what is happening out there, you need to be evolving, and you need evolving employees. So it makes complete sense that somebody with a light and a passion who feels stifled will come out of that organization. But as I've told students, when they look at their new timetable, some of you will understand that, they're looking at the new timetable and which teachers they've got, and they may be disappointed with the teacher that they have. And I've always said, don't look at the teacher, look at the subject. So if you love geography, your love for geography can't be killed by the fact that you're being taught by somebody that you just don't get on with. Keep with the love of the geography, keep with the love of the sales, but find a home for it. Don't give up on sales. Find a new home, because there are many evolving homes every day that are happening, and that's what he needs to be looking for, and keeping true to his strengths. So it may be that already I've established from not even speaking to him that he does like building relationships, he does like talking to people, he does like to learn an expertise. These are all strengths, and he needs to find an organization with a culture that matches his values, not for him to fit in to an organization that goes against his values.
Yeah,
And
I totally agree with you, Rebecca. And I think we've kind of hit a flea in the jar situation where, with the flea in the jar, the flea jumps up because there's a lid on the jar. You take the lid off the top of the jar and the flea doesn't jump out the jar. It just keeps assuming that the lid's still there. And I think what happens is that, when you hit organizations and maybe you've been put down 1, 2, 3 times, you give up. And as you know from in psychology, giving up is a condition that people have. And I think that's and I think in a way what he's got to do is he's got to basically find that passion again, if he can.
The passion is still there. And I think what we're talking about is the human condition of rejection. Rejection is not easy for anybody. Nobody likes rejection. But you can't allow it. And this is a habit that you have to practice to kill off your strengths. Lots of people can't even identify their strengths and need assistance with that. But once they are identified, then it's so much easier to find where your tribe is. And I'll give you an example, because I have been there several times, still there now. So my first career was as a defense criminal barrister. Now, to become a barrister, you have to apply for pupillage. And I applied. And in those days, you didn't really email. Well, I don't think there was email, actually, or it was just starting with a real dodgy line. But you hand wrote your application and in a letter. And we would get the best letter paper from W.H. Smith's, you know, the real nice thick one. And I used to practice calligraphy, so I had lovely penmanship. And I sent off maybe about 300 letters. I received 250 rejections, and I received 1 acceptance. I didn't hear from the others, but who cares? But the first 2 letters were heartbreaking. Then as the rejections came in, I had to then think, well, maybe there's something that I'm not presenting. But at no point did I think law is not for me and I have a passion for the law. But there's something that I'm not presenting that or they're not seeing. And that's what I've got to get around. And it wasn't until I was actually a sales assistant at Sofa Workshop in Golders Green. And I sold a sofa to, I'll call him a young gentleman, who was actually the legal director of a large newspaper, which I won't mention. But we were just talking, and I sold him a lot of sofas because he had a big house to furnish. And he had the whole sales floor to himself because it was early morning on Saturday. And as we were going through the different sofas, we were just talking about life. I was talking about my rejections and but I'm still going to crack on. And he said, you know what? Come and do 2 weeks paid work experience with us and see how you get on. So it wasn't down to the quality paper from W.H. Smith's or even my penmanship or even what I was writing in there. It was down to relationships, and I was matching my relationship and values with the law. And that's what got me to where I needed to be. So I think we have to accept rejection, but also train not only our young people coming through, but also possibly be open to those of us that are more experienced, that rejection isn't a full stop. And finding your strengths and matching your strengths, that's where you're going to find success.
I think there's a mic drop moment there, Rebecca. It's about relationships. You can't force relationships either. And I think so many organizations are forcing their salespeople to go and sell. And it's almost impossible to build a relationship when you're selling in a traditional way and not actually coming from the heart and building the relationship first.
And what I'll add to that story, so I would only, during the summer, I worked full time. And then going back to uni, I only worked on a Saturday. And I sold more sofas on that one day than the team in Tottenham Court Road did for the whole week.
Wow.
Just from, I mean, it did take
celebrate that.
In which case, we're going to promote you now to be a team leader.
Yes.
You've been so successful.
I think there's a couple
To which
of
I
things.
respond to, well, I'm not sure your values match my values, so you but no, thank you.
Very quickly sussed you out, Adam. I think there's a couple of points here. I mean, I know, Jonathan, you've unpacked some really interesting things in terms of, assumptions that have been discussed in regard to leadership, process, structure, style. Are we looking at unconsciously assuming there's one way? I think we need another session with Rebecca and talk about a couple more things. I'd love to have you back, Rebecca, if the guys all agree, which is I'd like to talk about techno stress and how that is there, and see if we can get Dr. Dale Childs back.
Is that a new music genre?
And usage genre, no. And then actually, Jonathan, your points, I think we will uncover them this afternoon and also next week, because sales and sales leadership now has to be highly adaptive. If we look at Matt Dixon's comments around the jolt effect, but go back to the challenger customer, there's now 9.8 people in the buying group. And you cannot do that with one approach. You cannot walk in with just a hammer and assume that everyone's going to be a nail, because they've all got different drivers. So to your point, the assumptions that everything can be done one way in a process, Jonathan, are, I think, so obsolete. But I'd love to get you on, Jonathan, as well, to have a look at some of those things, because we have to give growth mindset and adaptability the cornerstones of future sales ecosystems. And the only way you're going to do that is by recognizing the individuals. And I think Dale put it here, is actually helping people uncover their strengths and their future strengths, not their weaknesses.
But this is a seismic shift in how people envisage a sales function or a sales structure within an organization, but also organizations as a whole. Because
it's massive science diction, but basically, isn't it about time we join the real world as a sales function?
Absolutely.
No choice. There's no choice. The dollar or the pound will tell you you've got no choice. And in addition to what you said, Andy, it's about psychological flexibility as well, and developing these things don't happen overnight. They develop, you practice them, but psychological flexibility. I don't know if you've heard of acceptance and commitment therapy, but that's something where you may suffer from anxiety, but you don't run away from it. You actually go towards it, accept it, but make sure it doesn't take center stage in your path that you're going to. So you're literally saying, okay, I can feel that I'm really anxious. I'm not going to hide away from it. I'm going to place you to the side because I've got a job to do, and I'm not going to let this anxiety get in the way of it. Rather than trying to run away from it, which it will always catch you. And so the cycle goes on. And that's the start of psychological flexibility.
Okay.
Well, Rebecca,
thank you.
Absolutely amazing guest. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you to everybody in the audience. What a phenomenal tsunami of comments and questions from people in the audience. So we would love to have you back again, Rebecca, not too far away, hopefully. But as always, we like to finish up with a challenge or a comment. Alex, over to you.
Yeah. So before I go there, I just want to add to the agenda. So when we have you back, Rebecca, you said something about shared values and beliefs. And I'd love to kind of unpack that a bit more as well next time, especially as we see, 25-30% of the workforce being Gen Z in the next couple of years. I think they care about that stuff even more than us, certainly me as an older fogey. So last week we gave the audience a challenge. We were talking about trust, and trust being a problem, not just between buyer and seller, but within the organization itself. And I think we've been touching about exactly that today. So we asked in our community, is there a trust problem within your sales organization? 100% of people said yes, but it's bearable. The other answers was no problem at all, and yes, I'm looking for a new job. So if there was a challenge that you could perhaps give the audience, and I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but if there was a question or a challenge you could give our audience in relation to the topics we've been talking about today, what would it be?
The thing that comes to mind is keep it simple. If something's not working, don't sit in it. Keep moving. Just keep it simple. It's not working. Let's either make a change or let's move. But the worst thing is to sit in it for the next 20 years and have regrets. So just keep life simple. Is it great? Is it not? Simple as that.
That's magnificent. And I think the thing about that is that it's something that everybody can action. You know, they can look at their situation and decide, you know, actually things are not great, or I need to make some changes, and then go ahead and think what those changes might be. So thank you all very much indeed. Thank you all. Absolutely right, Steve. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you to everybody in the audience. Again, what a magnificent series of questions. It's almost like the audience of the panel in some cases. So hopefully we'll see you again soon, Rebecca. Hopefully we'll see everybody in the audience again soon. And until later today, and indeed next week, have a great week, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Bye, everybody. Thanks,
Bye.
Rebecca.